Okay, here we go. Instagram Live for June 14th, 2022. I'm going to cover a few topics today, and these are largely submitted from all of you wonderful people out there in the community, things that are on people's minds, and ideally I can just give my 2 cents on it. That's all I can do, and give my opinion and perspective based upon what I've experienced. I'm not saying that this is law, this is just my 2 cents. Okay, so the 3 topics that we're going to cover are using a rack versus not using a rack, just in general for squatting workouts. Number 2, are there times that you have to go unbroken on workouts? And if you can't do a workout unbroken, should you not do the workout or change it in some way? And then lastly, how to score the chief. And this is, I don't know what's going on with the chief, but several people have asked this question recently. And so, do you have to have complete rounds, not complete rounds? So I'll get to that as well. So those are the 3 topics: rack or no rack, going unbroken, and how to score the chief. So let's dive into the first one, which is rack or no rack. So let's take today's workout, for example, on CrossFit Linchpin, which is 5x5 overhead squat. But you could replace it with almost whatever workout you want, so to speak, that involves squatting and a rack. So you're going to take it out of the rack is what I would hope anyway. Maybe somebody's snatching it up or cleaning it and then putting it on their back, then doing a back jerk and then overhead squatting it. I think most people are going to have a rack, have the barbell in a rack, back rack it, rack it across their back as if they're going to squat it, back squat it, walk it out, and then with a wide overhead squat or snatch grip, push press it overhead or split jerk it in that grip overhead, and then do their set of 5 overhead squats. Here's where the question comes in. You finish your set of 5 overhead squats. Do you drop the barbell on the ground? And then of course that means you have to clean it to get it back to the rack. Or do you lower it back onto your body, to your upper back, your hopefully not your neck, and then walk it back into the rack like that, so that you never drop the barbell on the ground, thereby eliminating a need to clean it? First of all, it's important for me to say that there are no rules. I mean, in all honesty, whichever way you choose to do it, well, that's your choice. But since somebody asked what my opinion is on it, I'll give my opinion on it. I personally never lower it onto my back. It's just one of those things in my mind, it's not worth it to me personally. You might do it properly your entire life. All you need to do is do it wrong once. And then that negates the fact that you've done it properly 200 times. And that just doing it wrong once, if it's significant enough, could take you out of the game for weeks, months, or potentially longer. Heaven forbid I have to figure that if you're lowering it onto your back, it's after you did something, so you're probably fatigued, and now you're lowering what could be a significant load, right? Because you're squatting it using your legs, which are huge muscles. So it's probably a significant amount of weight that under fatigue or a little bit of duress, you want to lower, ideally controlled, onto your upper back, but heaven forbid it hits your neck. It's just, again, not worth it for me. However you want to do it, you can do it. I'm glad and happy to drop the barbell on the ground every single solitary time and clean it and get it back up there. And if you're doing so much weight, or maybe it's a back squat, you can't clean it, I would happily just strip the plates off. Let's say you failed the back squat and you had to ditch it, now the barbell's in there, whatever it happens to be like, I would just gladly take the plates off and get it back there on the rack every single solitary time. Again, your choice. That might be more of an obvious question on a day like today where it's 5x5 overhead squat and you have the barbell overhead, okay? But I also get asked this question on days that, as far as I'm concerned, it's quite obvious and it shouldn't have to be asked, but it still gets asked. And again, not, casting any disparaging whatever to somebody. It's a fair question. But for example, it could get asked on Linchpin test number 5, which is 20 back squats at 225 pounds or 155, a 2-mile run, and then another set of 20 back squats at that final weight. It's a rugged workout. And people will ask, rack or no rack? First of all, holy cow. Pat yourself on the back for being such a ferocious beast that it's even an option for you to just, wing 225 off the floor, pop it up over your head, casually get onto your back and start squatting. You're doing okay for yourself. And even if you could do that, so that to me is a workout that it should be very obvious that you use a rack for. Even if you could do that, it doesn't mean that you should. And even if you could, maybe you're that amazing human being that can do that, well, the second set, trust me from having done this workout several times, feels a lot different than the first set. So maybe you're fresh on that first set and it's well within your means and capacity to clean that thing, pop it up over your head, get it safely on your back. You do your set of 20 squats, you're an animal, and then you take off on the run. When you come back from that 2-mile run, that barbell's sitting on the ground and you have another set of 20 squats there, I guarantee your body and capacity is different than it was during the first set. For sure, unquestionably. So I would encourage everybody, go ahead and use a rack. Racks are wonderful, they work fantastic, and again, in my mind, lowering heavy weight onto your back, the risk is not worth the potential reward. So that's my kind of 2 cents on that. Now, I also understand that if you don't have a rack, right, and the barbell's on the ground, and so you know that you have to clean it every time, that it motivates you to a certain degree not to drop the barbell unnecessarily, to keep that sucker on your back and to grind out some squats. I get that. I understand that logic. Even with that being said, it's still not worth it to me, and I would still use a rack. And fitness is going to be achieved, and I'm going to be just fine, and I'm not going to have to worry about, heaven forbid, some very unfortunate screw-up that takes me out of training for some unknown period of time. So again, there are no hard and fast rules. You are allowed to do what you want to do, but that's my 2 cents on the matter right there. Okay, the next one, a fun question as well, unbroken. Sometimes people get things in their head and they feel like things have to be unbroken, and I don't know where it comes from. There's very few. Here's the deal, a workout will get posted and then somebody might ask the question, but what if I can't do it unbroken? And I'm like, well, nowhere in any description did it say that that was a requirement to do the workout. It's just a workout. Break it up as you need to, as long as it's within your capacity to safely execute the loading, the rep range, the movements and all that. No need to do it unbroken, but I get that question often enough that it's interesting. So somebody may ask, but what if I can't do it unbroken? And largely the answer is, who cares? And who cares if you can do something unbroken or not? Largely. There's some nuance in there, I get it, but largely. Nobody ever said that you had to. Again, I don't know where this comes from. Maybe it's from those pesky games athletes, and I say that in good fun. They're buddies and friends. But sometimes if you're watching people that routinely do large chunks of work in a superhuman nature and very rarely it seems like everything's supposed to be unbroken, then that might creep into your head that that's how most of us are supposed to do it as well. It's not the case. It's not the case. Don't let that seep into your head, right? That whole comparison is a thief of joy. There are very few workouts that are intended to be unbroken, and unless it happens to be arbitrarily stated as such or imposed by someone, I can't think of many that have to go that way at all. Maybe you have some random rules that pop up on a competition or challenge. They decide to impose a rule like that, and then something has to be unbroken. But that's an arbitrary rule that just, for whatever odd reason, somebody decided to make in a competition. But that's not training, that's not everyday life, and that's not something that you should allow to affect your thinking on things. Whether you can or can do something or a chunk of something unbroken, that might be useful as a metric to gauge a certain level of capacity, or it could be utterly meaningless. Okay, So I know that I just said both things there. Useful as a metric and utterly meaningless. So allow me to just chat about what that might mean. So here's examples of whether or not somebody could do something unbroken might be useful. So let's say somebody wants to attempt Fran as prescribed. 21-15-9, thrusters and pull-ups, 95-pound barbell for the gentlemen, 65-pound barbell for the women, and they want to attempt it as prescribed. Well, if you were their coach or training partner or buddy or whatever it happened to be, finding out how many unbroken thrusters, or pull-ups for that matter, they could do at the prescribed weight would be a useful metric. So you say, great, you want to do Fran prescribed for the first time. That's fantastic. How many thrusters in a row do you think you can do at 95 pounds? And if they say 3, that's probably my max set unbroken before it's too much and I have to put the barbell down. Well, that is now a useful a useful deal for me to say, we may want to pump the brakes right now and make a different decision. Same with the thrusters as well. So maybe a coach could say something like, all right, look, you want to do Fran prescribed, that's great. I need to know that if you were fresh, okay, maybe that's not what you do in the first set of 21, but if you were fresh, walked into the gym, got in a nice workout, could you just do a set of 15 thrusters if that's all you had to do today? Could you do that at the prescribed loading? If the answer is an absolute, yeah, for sure I could do that. You're like, okay, that's good to know. That's a useful piece of information. With that, I think we're in a good place that we can talk about doing Fran prescribed as far as the thrusters go. Anyway, because maybe if somebody could do 15 thrusters unbroken, again, it probably wouldn't make sense for them to do 15 in the set of 21 if that was their max unbroken, because they would just feel like they hit a wall. But maybe they do the set of 21 in 2 to 3 sets, right? Maybe they do 3 sets of 7 or something like that. And then on the set of 15, maybe they put the barbell down twice. They do a 6-5-4 or something like that. And then they break it up, once in the set of 9s. Super, fantastic, good to go. That was a useful piece of information, knowing how many thrusters you could do unbroken. So in that was useful, but you don't need to do Fran unbroken. But it's a nice piece of knowledge that helps us make a smart decision. So hopefully that helps people kind of figure out why that might be useful. How could it be meaningless? This is always fun. So let's see. Meaningless, or maybe that's too harsh of a phrase. Maybe it just doesn't have the same meaning that you thought. So maybe I ask somebody, and we'll play a game here and have some fun. Maybe I ask somebody, Fran, the most notorious and infamous workout in CrossFit. I'll say, can you do Fran unbroken? And they say, yes, I can do Fran unbroken. I go, wow, man, that is so cool and impressive, and congratulations, man. Whew. An unbroken Fran, that's no joke. That's fantastic. If you don't mind me asking, wow, unbroken, what was your time? And they say 15 minutes. It's like, okay, that's not what I thought when you said unbroken. Most people probably think unbroken and fast, but I did the set of 21 thrusters, then I rested 1 minute, then I did the set of 21 pull-ups, then I rested 1 minute, and I just played that game the whole way through, and I never touched the barbell or the pull-up bar until I was totally rested enough to know I could do that set unbroken. So yes, I have an unbroken Fran, and the time is 15 minutes. Well, now, that's obviously I'm being a little bit silly, but you get the point is, well, does that matter as much that it's unbroken? It's like, well, no. What matters, the fact that it was unbroken, or what's more important, how long it took you to do the work, even if you had to break it up? Largely, what will matter in the gym, what will matter driving your fitness forward, and what will matter in the real world, actually, is not whether or not the task was unbroken, but how long did it take you to accomplish the task? How long did it take you to accomplish the work? So if somebody does Fran in 3 minutes, which is blazing fast, but they dropped the barbell in the round of 15, so it wasn't unbroken. But they've got a 3-minute Fran, but it wasn't unbroken. And somebody does have an unbroken Fran, but it took them 4 minutes. So they were a minute slower. 4-minute Fran is still fantastic. Unbroken, they took larger breaks. Somebody has a 3-minute Fran, broke it up in the round of 15. Which one matters? Or which one is more impressive? Or which one wins? Or which one is a higher power up? But it's all going back to the accomplishing the task quicker. Doing the work in a shorter period of time largely is what matters. Largely. And there's interesting examples of this as well, as the way that my mind works anyway. In the real world, if somebody was military or first responder or something like that, police, firefighter, whatever it happens to be, if there's, heaven forbid, some task that occurs or some real life situation that you've got to go in and do some important work, what's probably going to matter is whether or not you do that work quickly. So, let's say you're in the military and you got to do down man drills, right? You got to buddy carry somebody, fireman's carry somebody some horrific distance because, you're getting them to safety or out of a hostile area or whatever it happens to be. And you're like, all right, look, we've got a down man here. We got to get them 800 meters away, fast as you can. They're bleeding out, whatever it happens to be, right? Let's not create a crazy situation. Got to get them 800 meters away. Gotcha. Well, what if one person carries that wounded individual 800 meters in 10 minutes, and the other person carries the wounded person 800 meters in 12 minutes, right? So one took 10 minutes to do it, one took 12 minutes. But what if the slower one, the 12-minute one, never put the person down, quote unquote, did it unbroken? The person who was faster did it in 10 minutes, put the person down a couple times, they moved quicker, took a break, moved quicker, took a break, moved quicker, took a break. So they didn't do it unbroken. What matters? What matters is how fast did you actually accomplish the work? Who got them there sooner? I don't care if you put the person down or didn't put the person down. The person that got them there in 10 minutes, that's what we're talking about. That's what we're looking for. So, again, there's no simple answer. There's a lot of context and nuance involved, but the overwhelming majority of the time, doesn't matter if you do it unbroken. As long as it's within your capacity, safe, and you're appropriately challenging yourself. You have to challenge yourself, right? You have to provide some sort of stimulus to your body. It has to be difficult, appropriately difficult, to get an adaptation in the system, but not overwhelmingly so, but it shouldn't be too easy either. So unbroken, not really that important. There's some other things that I would weigh a little bit more heavily in there. Okay, final topic, the Chief. So the Chief is a super fun workout, and we're going to talk about proper scoring of the Chief. I don't know why this has come up so much, but it has. So if you're unfamiliar with the Chief, here's what it is. You need a 135-pound barbell for the gentleman, a 95-pound barbell for the women, and you've got a 3-minute window. So think of like a 3-minute AMRAP. In that 3-minute, you're going to do a 3-minute AMRAP of 3 power cleans, 6 push-ups, and 9 air squats. So it's 3 power cleans, 6 push-ups, 9 air squats. As many times as you can do that in 3 minutes. Well, for the Chief, there is 5 of those 3-minute AMRAPs. You're going to do 5 3-minute AMRAPs, and there's 1 minute rest between each. Great workout, super fun. So the way that the Chief is officially written, I'll read you the official stuff right here. The Chief, max rounds in 3 minutes of 3 power cleans, 6 push-ups, 9 squats, rest 1 minute, repeat for a total of 5 cycles. Post rounds completed for each of the 5 cycles. So you will post the rounds that you have completed for each of the 5 cycles. That, I think, is what gets into people's heads, because it doesn't say rounds and partial rounds. It doesn't say rounds and reps. It says post rounds completed. And so the question becomes, can you only post fully complete rounds that you achieved in that 3-minute window? Or can you post partial rounds as well? So let's say you complete 4 full rounds and you look at the clock and it's 2 minutes and 45 seconds. You have 15 seconds left. There's no way you're going to do a whole nother round in 15 seconds. And so you do 3 more power cleans and 1 push-up. Well, what's your score for that 3-minute window? Is it the 4 full complete rounds, or is it 4 complete rounds plus 3 power cleans plus 1 push-up? And that would apply, and then you would ask yourself that same question for all of those 3-minute rounds. Which is the proper way to score that? Here's how I score the Chief when I do it, okay? For the Chief, I post my complete rounds plus my partial rounds, aka any extra reps completed in each 3-minute window. I count them all. I count every little piece of work that I do in each one of those 3-minute rounds. Those partial reps absolutely count for my fitness anyway, and they are important to me in my measurement of how I'm doing the next time that I do the Chief, my tracking, and all those little things matter, and that's why I get after it every day in the garage, for all those little things to see what they add up with. Now, the interesting thing about the Chief is when you start the next 3-minute cycle, you do start, as far as I'm concerned anyway, you start fresh, you start anew, you start with a brand new round. So using the example that I mentioned a second ago, let's say in that first 3-minute window, I do 4 complete rounds, and then I get a little bit into the 5th round. I get 3 power cleans and 1 push-up. I take my 1-minute rest. When the next 3-minute window begins, I don't pick up where I left off, because then I would pick up with doing push-up number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I would go into my squats, because I left off in the push-ups in the first round. That's not how I do it. That's not my understanding of how it should be done. When a new 3-minute window occurs, I start over fresh with 3 power cleans, and I get as far as I can in that 3-minute window. I count my full rounds, I count my partial rounds, I count my reps, I take my 1-minute rest, and then I start brand new with the 3 power cleans no matter where I left off in that very next 3-minute window. Now, and by the way, when you log it in BTWB, that's also, the software is just set up for you to do that, for you to log your rounds completed plus partial rounds and reps for every one of those 3-minute windows, and it adds them all up, which is fantastic. But let's say, again, there are no rules here, right? Let's say you decide to do it differently. Like, nope, it's full rounds, period. I'm not going to count partial rounds or reps. So in the example that you gave, my score for that first 3-minute window is 4 rounds. It is not 4 rounds plus 3 cleans plus 1 push-up. It is 4 rounds. Okay, that's just fine, right? You can do it however you want to do it. Does it matter? Yes and no, right? It only, would you still get fit? Yeah, absolutely. If you did it the same way every single solitary time, then you're totally good to go, because you have a consistent unit of measure from which you are gauging current performance, future performance, and past performance. You're good to go. That would work just fine if you only wanted to count full rounds. The only potential problem, whether you counted partial rounds or didn't count partial rounds, is if you had several people who were not on the same sheet of music, and then you were not only interested in gauging your own fitness and tracking your own fitness, but you wanted to compare your data to a larger group. Well, then if you're interested in doing that, what matters is that everybody is apples to apples and orange to oranges, and scoring everything the same, or else you're not going to have a level playing field from which to make any sort of meaningful assertions as to who's beating who or how you stack up or any of that good stuff. So that's all that I would say. But for me, yes, I count rounds completed plus partial rounds and plus reps. That's how I've always done it. That's how I'll always do it. I don't know if somehow it officially came out that you're not supposed to do that, you're just going to count full rounds, end of story, I would still count my partial rounds, and I would still count my partial reps, because I'm free to do it however I want to do it. And I like having all that little data, so that next time, if I get 2 push-ups more, that's more work in the same period of time. More power, more intensity, more good stuff, drove the needle forward. It all matters. So that is about that. And here's also why I would say, why I feel quite strongly that you are good to go to count not only full rounds, but partial rounds and partial reps. Again, getting back to how the workout's actually written, and where I think people think, well, you can only count full rounds, is, again, it says, at the end of the Chief, rest 1 minute, repeat for a total of 5 cycles, and then it says, post rounds completed, for each of the 5 cycles. And so again, since it doesn't say post rounds, partial rounds, and reps, it just says post rounds completed. That's why I think people think it has to be full rounds. But let's look at another very classic, well-known AMRAP, Cindy. 20-minute AMRAP, pull-ups, push-ups, and squats. What does it say at the end of Cindy? The same thing it says at the end of the Chief. Post rounds completed to comments. Doesn't say post rounds and partial rounds and reps. It says the exact same thing as the Chief. Post rounds completed. And what do you do when you do Cindy? I got 18 rounds plus 5 pull-ups plus 7 push-ups. Right? Same verbiage, so I take it kind of the same way. So that's it. Have a wonderful day. Hopefully that was helpful in some way, shape, and form. Enjoy the overhead squats, and we'll talk later.